Well, good afternoon. It's a beautiful day out, 66. The sun is out, and we're having an early spring. This is the report by no less than Thomas Jefferson. However, there's apparently a kind of a horseshoe effect around the nation in which we're having an early spring. So that means this week when we've had 60s and high temperatures, that's our spring. But the forecast for next week is 40. So watch out if you put out something that blossoms, because it may blossom and then get blasted in the cold. But you gardeners out there know better than I that that's the case. Turning to the hard news, and this is news really comes from Friday because courts aren't sitting on Saturday, but that doesn't stop some judges. And the particular piece of news I'm interested in is what's happening in New York with documents that my old office, the Southern District of New York, just couldn't find and put their hands on and produced them. Not a year or so ago when Bragg first asked for these documents about the case, because they had had a prosecution of Cohen, who is a key witness in Bragg's DA case. And then it turns out that Trump's been asking for documents, and at least since January, they've been saying any day now, any day now. And now it appears there are 100,000 pages of documents, and then another group that's, I think, 30-something thousand pages, and more documents were yesterday, which might include the 30,000. Who can keep track at that high number? Now, one of the things that you try to get in a case and that you ask of the prosecutor is to produce any exculpatory information. So if you're going to put Cohen on the stand, you have to provide, if you have it and it's not accessible to the defense, such information as would affect the defendant, meaning is it exculpatory? Is it inculpatory? Now, the question goes further, and that is, what if it affects the credibility of a government witness, Cohen? So the government wants to know what's in there because somebody's going to find it, and the defense wants to know what's in there because if they don't have it, they might be able to fairly say, and we wonder how much they contributed to the delay, they might fairly say, hey, we couldn't have a fair trial because we didn't have the information, and the government had it, but it didn't give it to us. Now, the government had it. It can't be held against Bragg because it's not Bragg who had it. It's the US of A who had it and didn't produce it. Now, some commentators are saying things like, oh, I'm sure Main Justice didn't know anything about that. And, this is the problem that we all have in lesser or larger ways. And that is we belong to an entity. We don't like to see that it's compromised. But how do you remain true to the facts if you already have a filter that, oh, it can't be this or it can't be that? Well, let's find out what it is. Now, we also know that the Trump administration leaned on the Southern District of New York, compromising its independence, chasing a U.S. attorney out of the job, and then Audrey Strauss came into the job, and apparently she was leaned on not to go forward with certain prosecutions. It's so reported, it may not be true, but that's the state of affairs. And now that their mimicry of an attorney general who can't seem to act when necessary raises the question whether it was Main Justice or the Southern District of New York and who was involved and who delayed the production of this material. Now, the flip side of all of this is that the judge is going to have a hearing when the trial was to begin, which is the 25th of March, and the trial is set 30 days later than a judge's note, I think last Friday or Thursday. And the judge is going to push this thing forward and say you've had enough time to have it. Now, the way to deal with massive document production like that is it all gets digitalized, it all gets indexed, it gets subject to Boolean searches, and you look for things. That is, you design requests to find out what's in there. And you might also have some people sitting in document dungeons, I'm exaggerating, looking at this stuff, actual pages. I've been in cases in which co-counsel or 4 co-defendants have printed all the pages. Well, that doesn't do you any good. Nobody's going to read 100,000 pages in time for a month from now. And I have to say that litigants, including the government, hold back on this information to the last minute, figuring you won't get to use it, but they can say they gave it to you. So that's that. The trial will go forward, I believe, but it's going to be delayed a month for the reasons I've just said. But it's scandalous. It's absolutely scandalous. And it's hard to believe it's accidental, because apparently there was a succession since January of, oh, we'll get you this, we'll get you this, we'll get you this, and they didn't. And we've seen this before. And you don't actually have to be corrupt if the theme is to delay in such a way that you get into the questionable period where, who knows, Trump might get elected, and if he does, he's going to test his hypothesis that he will be the first monarch in America. And he'll probably make fun of George Washington for failing to do it himself. But Hamilton and those guys were of a view that a monarch was a better idea. And the early form of democracy, if you will, was very narrow. You know, you had to have property, and you could only vote for certain offices, and you know, there were a whole bunch of things. Women couldn't vote at all. Certainly slaves couldn't vote. Others who didn't have property couldn't vote. So, you know, we've come a long way to perfect our government. And since 2015, I'd say it's been taking body blows from Trump and others. Now, as I said, the spring is here, and that should be good. And it feels wonderful being out today. And I love swimming, and I got to swim today, and I had so much energy. I was doing flip turns, which, as you know, if you've done swimming competitively, you flip at the end of a lane, and if your lungs are not in condition, it's like 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000 till you can draw another breath. So if you're not working out for an event, do you have to do flip turns? Well, I think it's an ego thing among former somewhat competitive swimmers. Now, in the category of really, there's an award supported by a group, the Ruth Bader Ginsburg Award. And those family members and others are asking, what are you doing? Because 2 of the beneficiaries of this award are Elon Musk and Rupert Murdoch. Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't get awards from anyone, but does that make sense? And when, all of us, I think even, I don't know if even in high school, we took these tests, you know. Then we took a test to, you know, lots of questions, and we answered them, SATs and LSATs if you went to law school. And you know, one of the things they look at is A is to B, as B is to C. And so if A is to B is equal and B is equal to C, then A is equal to C. You know, this kind of thing. So the other people who are getting awards, and I'm getting to it, the other people who are getting awards are Sly Stallone and Michael Milken. So now, I admire Sly Stallone for all that he's done, and I love the whole Rocky thing, but I don't know what that has to do with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Now, he may be doing things we don't know about, in which case he would make more sense to me. And so that's that. How about what's going on in Georgia? Now, I think that the prosecutor, Willis, has made the best decisions, that is to go forward with the case. But the defendants are claiming victory when the judge expressly said that they did not prove a conflict and they did not prove improprieties. So the judge did as much as he could for the people in the stands that are looking at him for the elections this November and whether or not to vote for him. And I expect, like most judicial selections, he'll be approved. And as I said yesterday or the day before, he was somewhat careful how he took aim at both Wade and Willis. Less care in terms of Wade. So what are we going to expect? Well, these guys may appeal. It'll be frivolous, and I'm not sure that they'll get the chance to appeal. The normal thing that happens at a trial is the entire trial must be finished and a final judgment in place before you can challenge elements of the case that you think are unfair. So, and they call that an interlocutory appeal. But you can, under certain circumstances, have an appeal even though the case has not been finalized. And a certificate approving an appeal is one way. Now, to my knowledge, at this point on Saturday, no certificate is issued for either side. So it could be denied if there is an appeal filed. And under the theory of delay, no matter how frivolous, which is what got them in this trouble in the first place, because they filed all those false documents about fraud. Now they file frivolous arguments to delay the case because that's their new stratagem. Now, I am not opposed to delay that is legitimate. And the New York case is probably an example of that. There are people who have done things in the Southern District of New York, lazy or witting, that has compromised both the prosecution and the defense in the state case. So it has to be dealt with, and the judge is doing that. So what about this? Well, the issue of immunity is one of the things that they want to play around with, but you may remember that Meadows went to court and tried to dodge that way, and they said, I don't think so. And in New York, there was an express move to take the thing to federal court, and the judge said, I don't think so. I think you're right in the state court. So there's a history that will move both those cases along, in my opinion. It's up to the judge, of course, but in the sense of if the DA comes in and says, I want to start the case, and I think we can do it 1 month from now, then what does everybody do? I think there'll be ketchup throwing parties at Mar-a-Lago when the judge does that, and I think there'll be Trump hitting his head against a wall because there's nothing in there anyhow. I mean, the nuns used to say to us, empty vessels make the most noise. Well, there it is, the prototype. Trump is the prototype for what those nuns used to say about all of us. And reaching across the waters to Australia, those of us who care about the environment observe with great interest, and I mean this seriously, how they deal with their emissions problem. Now, the Aussies are very proud of their pickups. I'm not being critical either. They're whatever floats your boat, right? Drives your car, drives you around. But here's the problem. They want to make more stringent the emissions standards. And these monsters may not be Mad Max, but they have emissions problems. And so, for those who sell these vehicles, if they're limited, that will affect their business plan. And so there's some suggestion that you can offset with a truck that has greater emission, other vehicles, and that will still affect the business plan of that market. But it's encouraging the government's doing that. It's the right thing they're doing, and people around the world do it. And I looked with interest to see if Tim Flannery, if a relation, a distant one, but a magnificent force in terms of the environment in Australia, and he writes majestically. If you want to read about any of the issues involving the environment, just go online, look up Tim Flannery, and pick out one of his books. He's a good writer, and he's got solid content. And when Holly and I went to Australia, the only time we've been there, I tried to get in touch with him just based on our names, and he was not in Sydney when I was there, and he wouldn't be any place where we could meet given our own schedule. But that's how much I think of him, and that's how much I think of Australia. And I hope those Aussie friends we have who are in our, I don't know what you call it, our Twitter family. Well, no, our ex-family. No, it's actually our present family. Anyhow, so that's an observation about Australia. Always dangerous when I'm in the United States and know a thin amount of information about what's actually happening in Australia, but I do know about pickup emissions. And this is a tough problem because, most of the things that we deal with involve change management. It could be age, relationships, it could be job, it could be what your skill set needs to be for the new aspect of whatever it is you do. So this is a problem that Australia has to come to grips with, but it signals what the whole world has to come to grips with, because we're not going to find a better planet on Jupiter or Mars or one of the moons of the other planets. And if those who are going to Mars, they can have my place on the rocket ship, because not in my lifetime is that going to be a place you want to go. So Elon Musk's rockets notwithstanding, and that was an impressive takeoff, but you do know that they lost it on return. So I guess that means it burned up, and maybe that was the plan, rather than risk it coming down in the wrong area by navigating, the skipping effect of going so high off the world, off the planet. So here I am, and it's a beautiful day out, and I say goodbye to you from my cathedral of trees. Now, for St. Patty's Day, although this wasn't planned, I'm going to be in New York. I'll be in New York for several days. So I don't know if I'll be near trees tomorrow. But anyhow, have a great St. Patrick's Day. Erin go bra. Bye-bye.